How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku was the son of Miss Joke. And now, let's begin. Izuku would be born a twin, with that twin being his twin sister, Izumi. His name would remain Izuku, and he would have the parents Miss Joke, like I said in the title, and his father would be Shota Aizawa. Now, Izuku would grow up a fairly normal life, being a happy child. However, much was not the same towards his twin sister, being Izumi. She would actually grow up quite weak, and it didn't help that on their fourth birthday she was diagnosed as corkless. Both of them would wake up close to the exact same time, with Izumi waking up earlier than Izuku and would shake him awake, telling him that it was finally the day they were going to get their corks. Izuku would immediately hop out of bed, really excited. It was their fourth birthday after all, and this was the day they would be told what their corks would be. So excitedly, they'd rush into their parents' room, just stomping down the door or just banging on the door because they were only four. And just as soon as that would happen, the first bang would occur, and Miss Joke would end up opening up the door. This, of course, being their mother. Oh, I guess you two are excited to go see what your corks are. Well, the doctor's office doesn't open until 10, so I guess we'll have to wait until then. As she would then go back into the room, shutting the door, and you would then hear just a locking sound, so as the two little kids could not open the door to go bother them even further. This would leave them 2 hours to just sit around excitedly waiting to be told what their quirk was, and so they could see how easy their path to becoming a hero was. However, when those 2 hours passed, they would all hop in a car, besides Mr. Aizawa having to go to work at UA High School, as they would then be driven to the cork doctor's office. Now, don't think that Mr. Aizawa and Miss Joke's age is still going to be the same. It's aged up quite a bit so that the age is still sort of match. And Izuku's still going to be the same age with all the same people around him, of course. So they would end up walking into the cork doctor's office as Izuku would excitedly sit down along with his sister right next to him. The doctor would then take a few tests, which would take no more than 20 minutes. Both of the two toddlers, children, I don't know what you would call them, would be just bouncing up and down in their seats, excitedly waiting for the doctor to come tell them what their quirk was so they can begin their path on to heroes. So the doctor would then tell them the news. Well, there's some good news and there's some bad news. What would you like to hear first, Mrs. Joke? Now, I'm just using that as a name just so you guys know that it's Miss Joke, as I know the real name of Miss Joke. It's just, I don't think a lot of you guys know what it is since I don't really think it's brought up too much. So I'm just going to be referring to her as Miss Joke and Aizawa as Aizawa, since I don't really want to say Miss Joke's full name every single time, as I think Miss Joke is quite easier to say, in my opinion. So the doctor would ask Miss Joke what she would like to hear first, the good news or the bad news. Miss Joke would sit there thinking and would ask to hear the bad news first, so they could get the bad news out of the way and would then get the good news. So this is where everything would start to go downhill. Well, Miss Joke, I'm afraid to tell you that your daughter here, Izumi, she is corkless. Izumi would immediately just sink down into the chair, completely shocked. She would be left there with a blank expression. She didn't know how to feel. Sure, she was only four, but it was like her entire dreams of having a quirk, a superpower, were just ripped right out of her hands by this one doctor. So the doctor would then jump to say, okay, how about the good news now? It appears that your son here, Izuku, he has sort of two quirks. I believe it's a quirk combination of your quirk and Aizawa's quirk, your husband, if I'm correct. Yes, you are correct, Miss Joke would say. And now this is the part where I explain to you to you all what Izuku's quirk is going to be. So Izuku is basically going to have two quirks, Miss Joke's quirk and Mr. Aizawa's quirk. However, there's going to be some slight alterations. In order for Izuku to activate his eraser quirk that he inherited from Aizawa, he is going to have to look at somebody who's laughing and then activate his quirk, which would inevitably cause them to lose their quirk until they stop laughing. So it seems quite like a very weak quirk. I mean, what villain is going to be laughing and then just lose their quirk? No villain's going to be laughing in the face of a hero, or unless the hero is just some weak, puny hero that they think they could easily take out. This is where his quirk that he inherited from his mother comes in. This quirk is activated when he touches a villain. As soon as he touches them, they immediately burst into laughter for a minute. And once this minute is up, they stop laughing, or if Izuku touches them again, it doesn't matter where he touches them. He touches them on the forehead, their hair, the chest, it doesn't matter. As long as he touches them, then they will burst into laughter for a minute. And this is if his quirk is activated and if he wants that to happen. So if Izuku touches them again, say if he taps them twice, that's 2 minutes. It can basically stack all the way up to 10 minutes. So if Izuku were to hit somebody with all 5 of his fingers, that's 5 minutes. If Izuku were to smack somebody with both of his hands and all 5 of his fingers would connect, that would mean there's 10 minutes, and that's the most he can get to make somebody laugh. And this would mean as soon as Izuku activates his eraser quirk and looks right at the person that is laughing, they lose their quirk up until they stop laughing. So both of the quirks are relatively weak on their own, but combined, they are insanely overpowered, and so that's basically just like my use of just combining the quirks. They are both very weak on their own. Say if either Izumi or Izuku got one or the other, that would mean they have to be a duo all times because their quirks would work simultaneously. But since Izuku got both of the quirks, that means they are insanely strong and quite overpowered. It just depends on how the user uses them. But Izuku doesn't have some sort of strength quirk, so this would mean he has to be insanely fast to get up close to the villain that he's fighting to touch them so that they can start to laugh. So Izuku would end up being sitting there and would smile and would start just cheering that he finally got a quirk that sounds super strong. However, he would realize that he should stop just boasting, or that's what it felt like to him, since his sister was sitting right next to him and she had just been told she was quirkless. I mean, he couldn't really do anything to fix it, but he is her big brother after all, and he needs to cheer her up. So Izuku would tell her that it's all right. You don't have to be sad. I can protect you, Izuku would say, smiling as if he was already All Might, which his sister would then thank him as Miss Joke would hurriedly push her kids out of the doctor's office and would put them back into their car seats and would drive off back to their house. Now, by the time they got back, it was around midday, and the school day had just around 3 hours left to it. So they were just going to sit there and waiting for Aizawa to get home so that Miss Joke can tell Aizawa the news. So when Aizawa eventually got home, Miss Joke would tell Aizawa, much like how the doctor did, that there was both good news and some bad news. The bad news being Izumi was quirkless, while Izuku had basically both of their quirks with just some minor altercations. Aizawa would smile at this, knowing that Izuku can become a great hero, but he would then look over at Izumi, who was playing with Izuku. He didn't frown or anything, he just wondered. Well, I could start training the both of them, just so they can have some self-defense, and it sounds like what you're telling me is Izuku doesn't have just some one-off quirk from any of our past relatives. So I guess he's going to need to be insanely fast and have tons of reflexes like both you and I. Miss Joke would agree with this and would tell Aizawa he can start training them when they are 8 years old, as she wants them to have a fairly good early childhood and not just be stuck with the grueling training that Aizawa would put them through. So Izuku would then just become the protector of Izumi. Miss Joke had told Izuku that he is her big brother and that he needs to protect her at pretty much all costs. Since she is quirkless, she is seen as weak to all of their classmates in school. Now, both of these two children would be kept secret from the public eye, as they were both just offspring of two quite well known heroes. Aizawa, somewhat well known, but not too much like Miss Joke. So they would try to keep them a secret, as they would be great just bargaining tools if they were to be placed in the villain's hands. So Izuku would end up going to school with the fake Elias, I'm not sure, with the fake last name of Midoriya, and that is also what Izumi would have. They were both twins, and so Izuku's last name would be Midoriya, and so would Izumi's. However, they would also go to the same school Izuku did in canon My Hero Academia, which means Bakugo would be there. So when Izuku would tell all of them his quirk, being some type of laughter quirk, he didn't tell them just his eraser quirk, as some kids might not want to be friends with him because of it. So Izuku just said if he activates his quirk and touches somebody, they'll burst out laughing for over a minute. Which the entire class would see that's a pretty cool quirk. I mean, who doesn't want to laugh sometimes, right? But they wouldn't really care, as Izuku was seen as one of the more weaker students in class. He wasn't really seen as a person who could become a hero, while Bakugo was just praised heavily for his crazy flashy explosion quirk. However, Bakugo wouldn't really care about this, and he wouldn't really even mind Izuku. So Izuku would pretty much go off without ever being bullied. However, his sister was another case. When she told everyone she was quirkless, she would end up having pretty much no friends. And when they would try to bully her for it, Izuku would step in, stopping them, which would also cause Izuku to be seen as someone who protects the quirkless and is just like a little wimp for protecting his sister, even though she's quirkless. So Izuku would also have much less friends than he would have if he didn't protect his sister and would just become another one of the bullies. However, both of his parents just installed in his mind, you need to protect your sister. She is very, very weak compared to you and all the other students. She is quirkless, and you can't have somebody just bully her because of that. So when they were 8, they would end up starting training with their father, Aizawa. So their training would begin, as they would then train for the next 2 years every single day, waking up bright and early, and then they would just train until they had to go to school, get out of school, and would then train. It was very, very difficult, and they were training much more than any other 8-year-old. Even Bakugo wasn't doing this training so that he could get stronger and become a hero. I mean, after all, he didn't have two hero parents that knew just how hard it was if you didn't train, and you couldn't get into UA if you didn't do that. They both are heroes, and they know how hard it is to just become a hero. So they made both of their children train as hard as they possibly could. And this would end up happening. Both of them would train. Izuku would make a lot more progress than his sister Izumi, but you could tell she was making loads of progress and she was becoming very, very strong. So, about a year into training, both of them would return from summer break much stronger than they were. They would try to keep just their training under wraps so that no one got randomly suspicious why these 9-year-olds or 8-year-olds were just training like out of their minds and becoming super strong. Like, this is where some teacher might say, wait, is somebody like drugging you or something so that you can just become some sort of trophy piece as like some random sort of strong child that they had? No, this clearly wasn't the case. They had two hero parents. So when they would go to school, Izumi and Izuku would sit down next to each other as the lunch bell would then ring after a couple of classes. Both of them would walk off, with Izuku going off to get his lunch after Izumi had already got hers. She would be sitting there as she would then be told for her to get up, as she would look around and question what was happening, as she would then be shoved out of her seat along with her food, which would land right on her chest, as she would then look up to see a bunch of kids laughing at her, just like, oh, poor little corkless Izumi. You're so clumsy, aren't you? Izumi would get mad at this. She wasn't going to handle this anymore. Sure, Izuku was protecting her from all the bullying. She just hated having to see Izuku do all the work. She hated seeing Izuku protect her all the time. She wanted to protect herself. So, in a fit of rage, she would get up and would punch Bakugo right across the face. As Bakugo would then fall down and would grab his cheek, which was very red, as he would then feel his nose to feel blood just trickling down it, as she had given him a bloody nose. He would instantly get up and show the teacher what he did, like a tattletale, and she would then be forced into the principal's office. As Aizawa, well, not Aizawa, Miss Joke would end up going to the office. Now, people knew that Miss Joke had two kids. They knew that. They didn't know, however, that the father was Aisawa, and Aisawa knew they couldn't have villains know that he had children. He was one of the most feared just heroes in the underworld apart from All Might. He could erase their quirk within seconds of him just looking at you, and that was insanely scary to everyone because every time he did it, everyone would end up getting captured. So no one had to tell them that they would end up getting their quirk back after he blinked. So it was just seemed it was a permanent eraser quirk. So many people were scared of him and wanted to know if he had kids so they could kidnap them and just use it as a bargaining tool to get Aizawa to just stop heroing and would end up getting captured and thrown into just some sort of dungeon. So when Miss Joke would end up getting there, she would end up asking them if they knew what the whole backstory was, and they said that Izumi punched Bakugo without any explanation at all, and that she just got up and punched him as he was just walking by, asking her to be his friend. This is where Izumi would just start talking and would then speak to the principal. That's not true at all. Bakugo just came back and pushed me out of my seat and threw my lunch on me. So I got up and protected myself in self defense. He called me a quirkless little clumsy Izumi or something. Can't remember, it all just happened so fast. Miss Joke would look at the principal just with a glaring look. The principal hadn't realized the whole situation, but they couldn't believe either student, so they had to take both of the students' side in this. At least that was the right thing to do. They would suspend both Bakugo and Izumi for their actions. Bakugo would end up being suspended for what Izumi said about what he did, and Izumi would be suspended for what Bakugo said he did, or what she did. Now, this would end up causing Bakugo's mom to get quite pissed off at the school. How dare they just suspend his Bakugo for doing something that wasn't even had any proof. I mean, they had proof about Bakugo being punched, after all. But she couldn't really do anything. The suspension had already happened, and she couldn't just randomly appeal it from the school board. It had already started, and there was no taking it back. So Izuku would end up continue going to school for the week that his just sister was there at home, and in order for Aizawa to teach her a lesson, she would be left out of training for a week. She couldn't protect herself like that. If she wanted to protect herself, she would have to go tell a teacher. Aizawa knew that they probably wouldn't listen to her because she was quirkless, but they had to do what they had to do. She couldn't keep getting suspended, or her hopes of getting into UA high school were just going to keep falling down, as every time you get suspended, there's just a less and less chance of her getting into such a prestigious school. So their training would continue for another year up until they were 10. This is when Aizawa would give them a month break. They had just been through 2 years of grueling training, starting from when they were 8 and ending when they turned 10. And he just wanted them to have a break. They really hadn't had any time to just be kids like they were. And they didn't have any time to play with any toys or video games. They just had time to train and do school. That's all they had to do. So, in this month, both Izumi and Izuku would try to just start make as many friends as possible. However, this was in pretty much the ending of the school year, and the school year had just a week left. So when the school ended, they had 3 weeks of free summer where they could basically do whatever they wanted. So Izuku would end up starting to explore the woods behind their house. their wood their house was in and just were surrounded by woods. It was in fairly a remote area, and it took them 20 minutes to get to school every single day. They didn't ride a bus, they were just picked up by their mother, Miss Joke, every single day. So day in and day out, they would end up being picked up after school by Miss Joke. So they would start to just explore the forest behind their house. Their house had a fenced backyard, so they didn't really get to explore it much in the 10 years of life they had. So Izuku and Izumi would basically make it every single day of the free summer they had. They would go out exploring and try to find new things. They ended up finding a river just around a mile behind their house, and they would end up following this river to see if it led anywhere. But they would end up getting caught out one night in the dark, having to stay the night out there, and they couldn't really find their way back until day had started. So they would end up coming back to the house and would end up being told they are not allowed to go back in the woods. But thankfully, it was the second to last day they had gotten caught out in the woods, so they didn't really have much else to do, so they just decided to train for the last free day they had. So this would start another 3 years of training. This 3 years would be 3 constant years until they would have another break as just 13-year-olds. Aisawa and Miss Joke had been told they will have to go on a business trip when their kids are 13, or it just happened to be a coincidence that the year they go on a business trip, both of their kids turn 13, so they can stay at home by themselves and they don't have to hire just a babysitter. So Izuku would wait until this 3 years would happen, with both of them training constantly. They had gotten very, very strong. I mean, these are 8-year olds. They started at the age of 8 and trained for 5 years with only 1 month break from 5 years. That's just insane. And they have to have a huge mental capacity to be able to do something such as this. It's a crazy feat of strength and endurance. And every time they would get up crying for Aisawa to make them or let them stop and give them a break, Aisawa would just make them do it harder. And this is something that they would gain a respect for their father for doing. He did not go easy on them at all, and this would make them feel like that he was training them as hard as he could so that they could become the best of heroes together. And this is why they would respect their father even more for going so hard on them. So, when this 3 years would pass, Izuku would be given a credit card which would have $5,000 on it, where they would have a month to spend that and would have a grocery list and recipes for Izuku or Izumi to make them so that they didn't go hungry every single day or eat a peanut butter sandwich every single day. So Izuku would continue just doing this list of things every day, going out and getting just groceries every single day. It was quite easy to do, and so he would continue doing this, just going out and getting groceries. However, it was quite the long walk, and both of Izumi and Izuku would eat quite a lot. So Aisawa, their father, would have hid multiple different credit cards with $5,000 on it around the house. This 5,000 would only last them about a week with how much food they were eating. They needed a lot of calories for how much calories they were burning training every single day. Now, if you're wondering about school, this break or this business trip both Miss Joke and Aizawa had to go on happened in the middle of summer, so they didn't even have to go to school for it. So Izuku and Izumi would both just continue looking around the house. Aizawa had hidden 3 gift cards, which would in total be two or $20,000, which 5,000 for each week with how much food they were eating, and they would try to save as much of this money as possible by going to the discount sections and eating lower quality food. Sure, it didn't taste as good, but they needed the extra calories for how much they were burning in training, and even when Aizawa was gone, they would continue their training. That is the drive and motivation they had to become great heroes together. 3.5 weeks would pass as there was half a week left until they would get to see their parents again. Izumi wasn't really feeling good and would end up just staying on the couch as Izuku would end up leaving to go get groceries for the next half of the week. So Izuku would leave and would begin his hour walk into the city and where the supermarket would be so that he could pick up groceries. So Izuku would start his walk, walking around just looking at random things, looking at trees, and just looking at the wildlife, which would cause him to stop multiple times, making his journey around 25 minutes longer to get to the supermarket. So Izuku would look around, just grabbing things they needed, like 2 gallons of milk and just a bunch of other things that they were going to eat in this next week. So Izuku would then buy all of these things with his credit card, as the cashier would question him once again, like he did every single day. He went out to get groceries. Izuku was quite young, and now he just had a credit card with 5 grand on it. That's quite a lot of money for just a random 13-year-old. So Izuku would tell him he got it from his parents as they told him to go get groceries, and the cashier would believe him every time. I mean, Izuku was telling the truth after all. So Izuku would end up beginning his trek back to the house, just continuing on going, stopping once again for just to look at random wildlife that he would see. He would see just other sorts of wildlife that he could. He'd see different types of trees, different types of mammals and animals. However, when Izuku was around a mile away from the house, he started to smell something. It didn't smell quite right, as Izuku would look up in the direction of his house and he would see black smoke. This strange sort of smoke just ballooning out of his house like a volcano, something he had learned in school. Strange, Izuku thought. What could that possibly be? Izuku would rush home to the next mile, as he would then look on to see his house completely in flames, as Izuku would drop the 2 bags of food that he had gotten from the supermarket. No one else was around, just him, staring on at a burning house. Staring at it. Just it was haunting. The house, everything was just burning and falling apart. Izuku could see the roof start to cave in on itself as he could hear the cracking of the wooden supports. Izuku would rush in to feel the door was locked. He had locked it when he had left. So Izuku would kick down the already weakened door by the fire and would look around. He was looking for his sister, Izumi. Had she gotten out in time? Was she okay? Izuku would think, rushing around, looking for her. Where could she be? Izuku would run up to her room and would end up seeing her lying on her bed, just curled up, coughing, as Izuku would pick her up and start to run. But it was already too late, as Izuku would get her out of the house and into the forest surrounding it, far enough away from the burning house so that they wouldn't just consume any of that toxic carbon dioxide. As Izuku would just tell Izumi it was going to be alright, and please for her to stay with him. Please, Izumi, you can't leave me, you're my sister, Izuku would cry. But it was too late. If Izuku didn't spend time just looking at the animals, if he would have just gotten back home faster, he possibly could have saved her. Was this some sort of villain attack? Was it, or did the house just catch on fire? Izuku didn't know. All he was focused on was saving his sister. Izumi, please, come on, stop messing around. This isn't funny, Izumi. Come on, wake up, Izuku would say, just staring down at her, and it would take him a moment before reality would finally set in. His sister was no longer with him, and he couldn't change anything about that. His sister was gone, and that's how the world was now. His sister would now just be missing in his life, and he couldn't realize that. There was still a week and a half before his parents were to finally get back home. Izuku would start to hear noises coming from the forest around him. It sounded like crunching leaves under someone's feet. So Izuku would take a moment to think about what this could be. It could just be an animal behind him or anywhere in the forest, or it could be someone trying to run away. So Izuku, taking this opportunity, would try to speak to the person that had killed his sister. Well, they didn't kill his sister, they just caused the thing that killed his sister, being the fire. So Izuku would then start to speak. I know you can hear me, so trust this. When I find out who you are, I will make you pay for what you did to my sister. As Izuku would then stop speaking and would then look down at his sister and would just stare at her. He had pretty much nothing else to do. There was still a half week left until his parents would arrive, so Izuku would then walk into the house. It had been a little bit since the house had burned, and it was already falling apart into ash. So Izuku decided to walk in, as he deemed it was safe enough for him to walk in and try to look for something. Izuku would go around just looking for anything he could find, as he would then find a cell phone that he had seen before. It was his sister's, and his parents made him know every password to a phone in the house. It was just a security concern. So if they ever needed to call somebody, Izuku would have to pick up a phone and put in the passcode. Want so basically, he didn't want to just find a phone and not be able to call anyone. So, sure, you can just say there's an emergency button, you don't have to have the passcode, but they know heroes, and it's going to take a little while for the dispatch to get to the heroes and the police. While if he can call, like, someone, for example, All Might, they can get there in a matter of minutes. So, Izuku would put in the passcode and would then call All Might, as Izuku would explain what had happened, as All Might would then rush over to the scene. Izuku and Izumi had met All Might when they were around 10. All Might had met them when they were training, as Aizawa decided to introduce them to All Might since they wanted to meet him ever since Izuku had got his quirk and Izumi was said she was quirkless. They just wanted to meet All Might. He was the number one hero after all. So All Might would rush over, as he would then find Miss Joke and Aizawa's house in ruins. As he would then look around at everything that had happened, he would see bushes just around the house still just smoking from fire that was barely holding on to its life. As All Might would then finally see Izumi laying down by a tree, as he would run over to her and check her pulse. It was completely just non existent. She had died, and her heart was no longer pumping any blood to her body. And that's how All Might knew she was dead, and there was pretty much no way to bring her back now, as it had already been a couple minutes since she had died, and her body had started to become cold and start the decomposing process. So All Might would look over towards Izuku and would wonder what they should do. All Might would get out his phone and would contact both Izuku and Izumi's parents, telling them what had happened, and would ask them to rush over to their house as soon as they possibly can. It was basically a moment of tragedy, and they needed to be there so that they can just bury Izumi as quick as possible, because he wanted them to be there to see Izumi one last time, and he didn't want Izumi's body to just start rotting away. So Izuku would be sitting there just completely shocked. The realization that his sister was never coming back had finally started to reach him, as All Might would then sit down next to Izuku and would tell Izuku this is the exact things heroes have to deal with all the time. Sure, they may not lose a sister, but they may lose a victim to a villain attack, as All Might would start to share stories about how he had just failed to save victims of villain attacks all the time. Say if he had gotten to a villain attack too late and the villain had shot somebody and they had already died, which All Might would feel terrible about, but he couldn't let it get past him, and he would only use that to fuel his motivation to keep going and to keep saving as many people as possible. So All Might would tell Izuku he can't let this get him down. He's got to use this for motivation to continue his path to becoming a great hero, and so he can continue on and become a hero and catch the villains that do this to people, that ruin people's lives and take their loved ones from each other. So Izuku would thank All Might for the words of motivation and would use this to fuel his passion of becoming a hero, and it would also fuel his vengeance and his rage that he wanted to get revenge for who had killed his sister. So Izuku would use this to study a lot, and he would also train a lot. He had basically cut out all games from his life, as he knew if he were to play games, he's not going to go anywhere. You can't just play games and joke around all the time, which is quite ironic, saying that his mother has a joke quirk and her hero name is Miss Joke, and he in fact his quirk is pretty much based on laughing. And Izuku grew to hate his quirk. He started to become a lot more serious and started to be a lot less happy and just focused. He knew he couldn't just be happy all the time, as people who are happy can often become distracted, while if he's focused 100% of the time, he can become a great hero. So Izuku would start to become less like his mother and more like his father, Mr. Aizawa. So Izuku would start to train, and a lot more than Aizawa had started training him from the start. Aizawa had moved their way up to more intense training, but Izuku started to push himself farther than Aizawa could ever have thought Izuku could have done. So Izuku would also continue his studies as well, as he started to study law and just doctor stuff. He would start to study just all types of different things, as he knew he must be smart in many different areas so that he can save people's lives. And one of the first steps was learning CPR, I believe that's the name. I'm kind of blanking on the names of random things. So Izuku would continue up just this path of becoming one of the greatest heroes of all time. And when Izuku would turn 15, he had, well, actually, when he would turn 14, he had one more year of middle school before he went into high school. This is when All Might would meet him. Aizawa had told All Might of all the things Izuku had done with all of his training and studies. So All Might knew that Izuku had the drive of becoming the greatest hero and to save the Earth. All Might knew Izuku had the drive to save the Earth from All for One, and so All Might would arrive at the Aizawa's new house. Which, if you're wondering why I called them the Aizawas, Miss Joke's name is her first name and then Aizawa, and Aizawa's name is legit just Shota Aizawa, I believe that name is, and Izuku's Izuku Aizawa. So, All Might would show up and would then ask to see Izuku, as Aizawa would lead him to their backyard and showing him where Izuku was, as All Might would then go over to meet Izuku. Izuku would stop what he was doing and would then go to speak with All Might. "Hello, young Aizawa. I have come to give you something." Izuku would ask what this gift was, as All Might would then start to explain something. Long ago, when Quirk started to appear, a very powerful Quirk, or a child was born with a Quirk that could steal others' Quirks, and this Quirk was known as All for One. However, he had a Quirkless brother, and he decided to give a Quirk to his brother, a simple stockpiling Quirk. And over time, that somehow grew and just manifested into One for All, which is the quirk I have, and it has been passed down from generation to generation, trying to stop All for One and his villainous ways. And now I want you to become the next holder of One for All Might would say, as Izuku would just still be completely confused. All Might would tell Izuku that all he has to do is eat one of All Might's hairs and let the hair digest, and he'll have his quirk. Which Izuku was still quite confused about this and also weirded out about having to eat one of All Might's hairs. It was very strange. So All Might would then explain how his quirk works and how it can be passed down from generation to generation as it just continues to get stronger and stronger. So Izuku would accept All Might's quirk. Remember, Izuku was laser focused on getting into UA High School and becoming the number one hero and getting revenge for his sister. So Izuku knew he had to make use of all the opportunities that were at hand and given to him. So Izuku would accept All Might's quirk and would eat the hair, as All Might would tell Izuku that his other quirks could possibly mutate with the just new addition of One for All. And so Izuku would just be fine with that. He really couldn't care less. He really only liked his father's quirk that had passed down to him, and he just wouldn't use his quirk at all. Remember, he started to hate it because of how, like, laughter and happiness it was when he was a lot more serious and focused about things, and he just thought it throws off just everything about who he wanted to be. So Izuku would then go to his bedroom, deciding that it was enough training for the day, as he would then sit down, starting to think about just everything that had happened in his life. He had gotten a crazy powerful quirk. I mean, it wasn't super powerful, but it could pretty much erase someone's quirk for up to 10 to 20 minutes. And yet his sister was quirkless. He had this quirk, but she didn't, and then she died, just completely removed from his life. And it was insane how everything just seemed to go so fast. And he just wanted to slow everything down to try to just think about everything that had happened to him. So Izuku would go to bed, just his mind completely just confused, as he would want to get some rest before anything too much would happen. However, when he would wake up, Aizawa would tell him All Might is waiting for him in the backyard, as All Might would tell Izuku that he has a training regimen he needs him to do. As All Might would then ask Izuku to follow him, as they would then walk to Daegu Beach. It was around 4 a.m. at this time, so it would take them just around 2-3 hours to walk to the beach. It was a short distance by car, but a long distance walking. So Izuku and All Might would get there just around 6:30 a.m. As All Might would tell Izuku he wants him to clear out this entire beach of trash before the UA entrance exam. So Izuku, not even sweating or not even skipping anything, he would immediately jump in and start to pick up this trash and put it into piles, as All Might would then just take it off to the dump. Now, it kind of confuses me how Izuku would just pick up trash and throw it into a pile or something, which I think All Might would actually make Izuku put it into his truck so he would drive off. I don't think there was too many details on what was happening cleaning the Daegu Beach when there probably should have, or maybe I'm just forgetting something. I don't really know. It would take Izuku just around a month to finish the entire beach and having it clean. Remember, it took a quirkless Deku who just got one for all 10 months to clean the beach. However, Izuku has been training for a very long time, and he has a quirk. So Izuku pretty much finished this with a breeze, and that's how All Might knew he made the right choice. As Izuku would completely finish that and would go on to start training other things. However, around halfway through his training, Izuku would be walking back from the grocery store as he would then hear an explosion. As he would look down the street to see just a massive smoke cloud appear. As Izuku would start to get flashbacks of the just the same smoke that had occurred when he was at the house when it was burning down. It was the smoke from a fire. So Izuku would rush down the street as he would then look down the alleyway as he would see a sludge villain and Bakugo trying to struggle to get free. So Izuku knew he had to use his quirk. And which quirk could he possibly use? It was a sludge villain, which is a mutant quirk, so he can't use his just erasing Quirk. So, and two, how would he even touch the sludge villain to make it laugh so he could use his Quirk? So Izuku would then decide to use his one for all Quirk that he had got from All Might. Remember, Izuku had not used his quirks in quite a very, very long time. He had just focused on training one for all and not his other quirks. So he had completely forgotten about how All Might said they could mutate and change into something else, so he really wouldn't know what they would be, and he really had no point in knowing. So Izuku would rush at the sludge villain, as Izuku would then punch it as hard as he can with the One for All activated in his arm. As the sludge villain would then blow past Bakugo, as Izuku would grab Bakugo's arm, putting him down on the ground, making sure he didn't blow away with the sludge villain as well. So Izuku would look at the coughing Bakugo and would call 911, telling them that his friend had just gotten attacked by a villain and he had saved him, and that he needs an ambulance to come to this location. As Izuku would look at Bakugo, asking him if he was okay, as Izuku would then see a small scar across Bakugo's cheek, which Izuku can never remember seeing that. It was way too small to notice from afar, but it was quite obvious when you were very close up to him, and he just couldn't remember Bakugo getting into a major fight that could possibly give him a scar like that. So Izuku would just brush this off. Maybe he got into some fight that he didn't really care about and just walk away. Izuku had liked watching people fight. It made him just study things, and so he could see how people with no experience would fight. And he would also see people with experience would fight, just learning different types of moves that his father Aizawa had not taught him. So Izuku would just leave Bakugo there as the ambulance would then arrive, knowing Izuku would have to get home with the groceries that his mother would have to prepare for dinner, and he wanted to eat dinner as fast as possible, and he didn't want to be late. So he would hurry home, hoping that he wasn't too late for his mother to start cooking dinner, as if he was late, he wouldn't end up getting dinner and she would not even cook him anything at all. It was sort of a punishment for him just getting late to the house, as Izuku had oftentimes become distracted. For example, what happened to his sister, he had gotten distracted by the forest around him. So Izuku would walk home as the day would end up passing, and so would 5 months, as it was finally time for the UA entrance exam. Izuku's mother had been offered a job at UA, which Miss Joke was just wondering if she should accept or not. She didn't really like UA at all, thinking that they were sort of snobs and that they didn't really do any sort of great training that could be used for someone like her or Aisawa's Quirk, as she knew the entrance exam was just a bunch of robots, and that didn't really suit someone's quirk like Izuku had. Now, of course, both her and Aizawa knew Izuku had one for all, so she knew he was going to pass it very easily. However, she wanted Izuku to come to the school she taught at, so that she won't have to deal with Izuku becoming a snob in her mind. Sure, Aizawa taught there, but he taught there. He wasn't a student. So Izuku would just tell her that his dream was to go to UA High School and not the high school she taught at, as Izuku would tell her he's sorry and would then go off to the entrance exam. So Miss Joke would end up following him, but would just be too late to end up catching him to speak with him, as she would then arrive at UA 30 minutes after just everyone had arrived for the test. So she would end up walking into the teacher's room, having known it because Aizawa taught there, as she would then look down at Nezu, who was looking at a bunch of TV screens of just the entire hero course exam, making sure every city was in place with tons of robots around it. As she would then give Nezu just an acceptance form saying that she wants to work there and that she accepts the offer to work there as a teacher. So Nezu would smile at Miss Joke and would thank her for coming to teach at UA, as he would then just tell her all the things she would be doing, and she would most likely be a co-teacher to Aizawa's class, being Class 1A. So she would end up sitting down in the room that Aizawa and all the other teachers were in. Remember, Aizawa liked to get to things very early, so he would arrive extremely early before the exam even started. Now, this Aizawa didn't really have all of the sleep that he needed, and he just woke up very, very early, a habit he had gotten from training Izuku and Izumi at like 3 a.m. each day. So it was a bad habit, but he just decided to get to anything in the morning extremely early. And if it wasn't in the morning and it was at night, he would just sleep the entire morning. So we cut to see Izuku in just this massive auditorium as he would look down to see a stage, as lights would then turn on, as President Mike would then walk out from these curtains by the side, as he would then start to explain the first test everyone in the room would be doing, and that would be the basic entrance test. If you got this, you would be placed in any of the classes. However, if you wanted to be placed in the hero classes, you have to have taken or signed up for the hero course and the hero test. So kids would take different tests, right? Everyone would take this test, the basic just test. This would test your IQ and test your mind, making sure you knew everything and all the math algorithms and you had just a basic understanding of everything you needed to know for high school. As this was a private high school after all, basically only for the smartest of kids. And if you wanted to take sort of like a business course or a support course, you would have to have done other tests, which were a week before this, as those tests would take a lot longer of time. Say the support test, which you had pretty much a ton of time to prepare for and make your gadget to give to the support teacher, who would then assess your gadget or just your support item, and they would see what you written about it and what you did. However, this really does not matter, as Izuku wasn't applying for the support course. So Izuku would be given the basic just knowledge test, as he would take it in passing very, very easily. Remember, this is Izuku we're talking about. He had trained his mind and body for years, and I know you probably already all know that. It's quite obvious, as I've said it like 20 times now in this what if. So Izuku would easily pass this test, as he would then be told that he wouldn't be told, the auditorium would be told that anyone who is not taking the hero course test, you may now leave the UA premises and you will get your results in exactly 2 weeks' time. Thank you for taking the test and now goodbye. As most of the room would then file out of the 4 doors, as Izuku and a couple other people would be left sitting in this auditorium. Just around 40, 60, 70 people out of the 200 people that had left the auditorium. Not very many people applied to UA, and so there wasn't a lot of people. However, there was a week of testing. it starts with the support course and business classes, and then it just keeps going from there. Like the basic knowledge test, there's 4 days of it. If you're taking the hero course, you're on the last day of that testing. While other people taking the knowledge test can also be there, it's just mostly hero course kids. So President Mike would then show them a board as it would then turn on as he would give them a presentation about the 1 pointer, the 2 pointer, and the 3 pointer robots. He would then talk about the 0 pointer robot, about how it's a robot that should just be avoided. It really had no need to be destroyed as it was massive and it was just some sort of roadblocker, for example. So Izuku would not really care about the 0 pointer, but he would hear a key word about it. It was massive. So Izuku would wonder how President Mike was using this word, and he would just think, well, I'll see when I get there to the test. So Izuku would walk out of the room when President Mike said them to, as there would be heroes standing out there just handing them a card. This card would have 3 numbers on it. Well, actually, there would be one of 3 numbers on it. There was a 1, a 2, or a 3. If you got a 1 card, you'd be placed in City 1. If you got a 2 card, City 3, and the same for City 2, or City 3. I can't remember what I said. So Izuku would end up getting a 1 card as he would then be placed in City 1. So Izuku would be looking at the gates, waiting for them to open so he could rush in. Izuku got one tip of advice from his father, Sawa, before anything had begun. If the gates open, you run. You don't want to be the kids standing there waiting for President Mike to yell go over the intercom. That is a 10-point just minus off of your total score. So you better just run as soon as the gates open. And sure enough, as soon as the gates opened, Izuku would instantly start to sprint out, as he knew from what Aisawa had told him, a hero doesn't wait for somebody to tell them to save a life. A hero does it without even having to wait. They instantly go to save it without someone telling them, go do that, without any push from somebody else. So Izuku would look back, barely seeing everyone else just laughing at him, thinking he was going to just get disqualified for running just instantly. However, President Mike would then come over the intercom telling them, what are you guys thinking? A hero doesn't wait for someone to yell go for them, as they would instantly start to follow Izuku. However, he had already left a path of just robot parts and metal that had been destroyed and ripped apart. Izuku had 5 months to train with One for All. He had left 4 months after he had cleaned the beach to increase his strength, as his intensity that he had done cleaning the beach, like lifting fridges and just laundry things, a laundry machine and a dryer, as Izuku would continue just lift these, as he would start to do more intense workouts like these, as he would then have 5 months to train with All Might with One for All before the sport, or not the sports festival, before the entrance exam began. So Izuku would also end up having around 2 months after 3 months being trained with All Might, as it was 5 months All Might wanted Izuku to train with him. However, he thought of an idea that he had and would just drop Izuku off at Gran Torino's place, as Gran Torino would then start to teach Izuku as well, as Izuku would then learn how to have full cowling and would also learn shoot style, which was what he would use his legs for in around, I believe, season 3, late season 3-ish, I believe. So Izuku would learn shoot style and full cowling, as he could use just around 10-20% of One for All. Sure, Izuku had trained a ton, however, he didn't train just as much as he could have to have such a higher just One for All, as this was full cowling, not he could basically use 100% of One for All in his just arm, but that would just completely shatter it, just like it did to Deku and Canon My Hero Academia. It just wouldn't break as much as it did with Izuku and Canon My Hero Academia. So we cut back to just the entrance exam, as Izuku would continue to destroy all of the robots around him, as if he saw a robot, he would destroy it. His other quirks that he had gotten from his parents were completely useless, and he hadn't even used them yet for at least a year, as he hated them. Remember that he hated his Quirk, well, mostly his mother's Quirk that had she had given him, but that didn't cause him to hate her. He just hated the laughter Quirk. However, he loved the idea of his father's Quirk, and it could be used with One for All. He just didn't know how to use it, as he had to use his mother's Quirk, and he just didn't want to use that Quirk. It was something he just despised. So Izuku would continue destroying these robots, racking up tons upon tons of points, as Izuku would then hear a cry for help, as he would look up to see a girl just being held by the zero pointer, as it would be looking down at her. He had picked or the zero pointer had picked up this girl as she was trying to just stomp on a robot, hopefully trying to destroy it, getting points. As the robot had picked her up and was just shaking it around. It's a robot. It pretty much had nothing else to do. It was a zero pointer, and it was basically just a distraction. And if you got too close to it, it would basically just pick you up for the rest of the entrance exam. So Izuku would rush into action, as he would then punch the zero pointer right in its head, jumping up much like he did in the actual anime, as Izuku would then look at the girl who was falling, as the robot had released its hand, having its just computer parts holding that hand to make it clenched, would end up just dying with Izuku's punch, just short circuiting, as Izuku would then see the girl falling, as Izuku would then jump out to try to catch her, but he would see that she was floating down, as Izuku would then grab onto the ledge of a building, as he would see her just continuously just float down, as she would then reach the ground, throwing up behind her, as this would be Ochako Uraraka. Izuku would jump down to where she was and would just say sorry for not catching her, as he just saw her floating down, and it was quite confusing, as he thought she would just fall down and he would have to save her from that. However, she would just say, "Oh, thank you. It's my fault I did that. It was reactionary, but thank you for saving me from the robot." Izuku would just say, "Oh, no problem," as he would then walk off, hoping to destroy more robots, wanting to have an even greater chance of making it into the high school. However, before he could, he would hear the siren sounding that the entrance exam had ended, as Izuku would just say that his name was Izuku Aizawa, and he would just walk off into the distance, leaving the UA premises. He was told at the start, if you're doing the hero course, as soon as you hear this siren, as President Mike would then give an example, just leave the premises unless you're hurt, which you can stay where you are, and Recovery Girl will come and assist you. So Izuku would leave the premises, hoping that he had made it into the high school. Izuku would make it back to his house, as he would then open the door and would sit down on his bed. He knew it would be a little bit for his parents to make it back to his house, or their house, since they had to just do all of the examinations to see who had made it into UA high school. And he knew his mother would probably get either before or after Aizawa, since she was working at the other hero school. Remember, this is before Izuku knew that she had joined the UA staff. So Izuku would be sitting there just waiting for them to get home, and 3 hours after the entrance exam had ended, they would finally arrive home, as it had already become nighttime and Izuku had just decided to sleep. This event took quite a very long time, so Izuku had already fell asleep, as he was already just tired from the exam, using pretty much up most of his energy, just trying to get as most points as possible. So Izuku would then have to struggle to wait 2 weeks before the letter of acceptance had just gotten back to the house. However, before Izuku could do anything or do any waiting, Aizawa just blatantly told Izuku he made it into Izuku, or made it into Izuku, he made it into the high school, and that he had gotten first in the hero course, making him the first year representative of the entire school. Well, the first year representative for the hero course, that is. So he would be speaking at the sports festival since he had gotten first place. So Izuku wouldn't really care about this as he had just decided to start preparing for UA high school. He had finally made it into his dream school and he was ready to start his journey to becoming a hero. So Izuku would then wait the 2 weeks as Aizawa would give Izuku just this uniform to put on, as the day had finally come for the first day at UA High School. Izuku noted he had never gotten a letter, but he just thought Aizawa had told Nezu not to send them a letter, and that he was just going to tell Izuku that he made it in. So Izuku would then start to walk over to UA High School, as his parents had already left, having to get there early, as it was a new policy Nezu had made. As Izuku would walk to the high school, as he would then sit down in his seat that he had chosen for himself. It was the first day at UA High School, as Izuku would just start to look around the classroom, just wondering how crazy it was that he was finally in the high school of his dreams. It was insane, Izuku thought. As the rest of the students would then start to pile into the classroom, as Izuku would see who his other classmates were going to be, as he would then see the same girl, Uchaku Uraraka, had just entered his class as well, and he noted that the girl he had saved also made it into Class 1A. So, 5 minutes after the bell had rang for the first class to start, his teacher Aizawa and the other teacher, Miss Joke, would arrive. And if you're wondering why they need two teachers, it's a hero class, and they're going to be doing a lot of exercises so they can break it up into two groups so that each kid gets pretty much the same amount of exercise. It's basically like if you're doing a sport, you want no one to be sitting around doing nothing during practice. You need to use the full extent of your practice time to get as much just knowledge into your mind as possible. So that's what their plan was to do. And also, Izuku was in Class 1A, and they might as well just put his mother in there as well, as his father was already teaching the class to begin with. So Izuku would then hear Aizawa walk in the room and would then tell them that they all have PE uniforms in their lockers. They all have 10 minutes to stop by Nezu's office to pick up their keys at Nezu's office for their lockers, find the lockers, make it or change into their PE uniforms, and make it down to just testing Site E, which is where they would be testing their quirks for the first time ever, pretty much. Which Izuku had already tested their quirks, but it was sort of just a physical exam for them to see how strong their quirks were. So Izuku would walk over to Nezu's office, as he had noted that Aizawa had also told them do not run, as if they get caught running, they will be just put into detention and will have to stay 3 hours after school ended. So Izuku decided to walk, as pretty much the whole class decided to run, thinking that they had no time at all to make it down to the locker rooms and do all of that. So Izuku would go to Nezu's office, grab a key, and would then ask for a map of the high school, as Nezu would give it to Izuku, as Izuku would look on it, as he would then ask Nezu where the locker rooms were located, as Nezu would point to the bottom floor. Izuku was on the fourth floor, the highest floor, so Izuku would then go over to a window in Nezu's office, as he would then open the window and would hop out of it, as he would use his quirk to land, as he would walk over to the entrance and walk into the first floor, and would then use Nezu's directions to get to the locker rooms first. As Izuku would then arrive there, as he would see a couple of kids with detention slips who had already gotten there. However, a lot of people had not gotten there, as Izuku would open up his locker and would then get changed, as he would then make it out there first, as all of the students were rushing because they had been told they would get expelled if they were to get there late, as Izuku had gotten there 3 minutes early, as Izuku knew his father was too lazy to do 20 just papers of having to expel students. So Izuku really didn't care, but he wanted to be the first one out there, just so he could be the first one out there, so he could maybe get extra directions from his parents. So Izuku would be standing there as the rest of the class would finally make it after 5 or so minutes. Some people were late, while some people were just a little bit early with some time to spare. As Aizawa would then tell them they will be doing some tests to just test how strong their quirks were. So Izuku would then be thrown a baseball and be told to stand in this circle and throw this baseball as far as you possibly can. So Izuku would walk into the circle and would power up one for all and would then throw the baseball as far as possible. As Izuku had gone into full cowling as much percent as he could, as just this green electricity would start just running around his body as he would then throw the ball, just getting around 2,000 meters, as the entire class would look shocked. Some would even say that it looked fun and they can't wait to try it themselves. As Aizawa would then sigh and would tell them, "Fine then, if it's so fun, how about another just threat to expel you all? The person in last place will get expelled then." As the entire class would just give death threats to the person that said it was fun, but they would start to focus, as they knew they couldn't get in last place. The entire class would perform quite well, as they had some very powerful quirks. Izuku, of course, would end up being first in the test, Bakugo in second, Todoroki in third, Momo in fourth, and so on, so on. The person in last place would be Mineta. However, Aizawa would tell them, to Mineta's relief, that he wasn't actually going to expel anyone. He just did that as a test to make sure everyone was trying their absolute hardest, so that he could just test how much potential somebody had based on another person, or how much potential this person had or this person had, just to make sure no one was just doing things because they knew they weren't going to get expelled or they weren't going to get in trouble. So he wanted everyone to be trying their absolute hardest. So Aizawa would then tell them that they're free to go for the day, as that's all he wanted to do, as they now have the entire day free for them to do pretty much whatever they want. The entire just class, or the entire just period blocks and all that, would end up being told to them tomorrow, as the first day was just orientation and different things they would do. They would meet like their English teachers or their math teacher tomorrow. So when they would walk in, they would have to do all of that, and just about a week later, they would have their first hero class. Of course, the first week they were there, they were learning about safety and all this different sorts of things where their hero class would be. However, they had to just the entire rest of the day after lunch was hero work and what they would be doing. So after they ate lunch, they would walk back to their classroom, as they would start to whisper, saying that this was the day they would finally see who their hero teacher was, and if it was a hero, a good hero, or if it was just some random person that off the streets or something. So they would start to hear running from down the hall, as the door would then burst open off of its hinges, breaking the door in half, as they would then see All Might standing in the doorway, as he would then laugh, as kids would just start marveling at All Might was now their hero teacher, as All Might would then tell them that he is their hero teacher now, and that they will be just doing some hero work. However, today they will be designing their hero costumes, and tomorrow they will have their costumes made for them, and the day after that, they will then be able to do a exercise against each other with their costumes on. So they would then design their costumes as Izuku, instead of designing something that was like All Might, like in the actual anime, Izuku would do a more stealth like costume and a more tactical approach to the costume, making sure it had everything he needed if he was going to be a stealth hero or if he was out in the day and it was just 12 p.m., the middle of the day, and he was going to be seen by everyone. He made sure his hero costume was just eye catching, but it was also just making sure everyone knew that he couldn't be seen in the dark, basically. If it was dark, you couldn't see him. It was extremely black, but it was also sort of flashy if it was at day. As Izuku knew if he was going to be the number one hero, he needs something flashy but also can be used for stealth. As he didn't really like All Might's costume that he was wearing with the blue and the yellow. You could see it if it was 12 a.m., the middle of the night. So Zuko didn't want that. He wanted to be a more stealth-like hero like his father, while also doing a lot more of day hero jobs like bank robberies or things like that. So Izuku would design his hero costume like this as a couple days would pass, as they would finally get their hero costumes, as they would eat lunch and would then go to their hero class, as All Might would already be there waiting for them, as he would then laugh. Now, this is the day you will be able to put on your hero costumes and make your hero debut. Well, not yet exactly. We will be doing your sort of hero costume debut in this hero exercise, which you will be put into teams of two, a hero team and a villain team. These teams will go against each other and will end up fighting each other, as the villain team will be tasked with hiding a bomb and protecting it inside a building, while the heroes are tasked with disarming that bomb. And of course, it's not a real bomb, it's a fake one, just so you all know. As All Might would then hit a button, as briefcases would start to come out, as all of their desks were labeled with a number, and that number would be which suitcase their hero costume was in. As All Might would tell them this, as they would go grab their hero costume, as All Might would tell them they have 20 minutes to put their hero costume on and go down to City A, as they would all do this and would arrive there very, very early before All Might had even thought they would get there, as you would do roll call seeing everyone was already there, as everyone wanted to start their hero just testing. They wanted to do this and they were very excited about it. So All Might would then begin a just sort of lottery of which teams would go first. The villain team will be Bakugo and just Todoroki, and the hero team will be Izuku and Uraraka, All Might would say, pulling just names out of a hat, as he would then just crumple them up and put them in his pocket, as their name tags were no longer needed to be in the hat, so they wouldn't be called twice. As All Might would then lead them up to, or lead the rest of the people who were not called up to this sort of just watching place with a big TV, as they could cut to cameras to see where each person was, as there would also be just microphones inside the building picking up sound so they could hear what was happening. So Izuku would walk around just waiting for All Might to tell them to go, as the cameras they had installed in the building and outside of the building could be used from, as they had a microphone that All Might could press a button and speak to them, as All Might had told them the villains have 5 minutes to set up the bomb, and the heroes have to wait for those 5 minutes for the villains to finish setting up the bomb and for them to just, or for All Might to give them the go to head into the building. Izuku would then hear All Might start to talk after 5 minutes had passed. All Might would give them the go ahead to enter the building and begin their test. As Izuku would walk into the building, being on high alert, hoping that no one would just jump out randomly and attack them. So Izuku would cut around corners very, very fast, hoping to just get a quick start on an attack, say if Bakugo or Todoroki was waiting for them. So Izuku would then hear stomping from the floor above, as Izuku would tell Uraraka to be quiet, as they would both hear the stomping sounding like someone was running and sprinting around the halls. As Izuku would then track where the footprints were sounding to go, as Izuku would point to a direction, as he would then see the stairs and would open up the door to the stairway, as Izuku would walk up the stairs and would then look out through the window of the stairway door for the floor above them that they were just on, as Izuku would see Bakugo sprinting around the just room looking for somebody that he could just defeat, as Izuku would look over to see just Uraraka standing behind him, as Izuku would open up the door, as Bakugo's head would instantly jolt towards them, as he would run to attack Izuku, as Izuku would dodge out of the way on reflex, as he would then touch Bakugo's back as if he was activating some sort of quirk, as Izuku could feel his hand have some sort of power going through it, as Bakugo didn't burst into laughter like Izuku thought he would. However, Bakugo would then turn to use an explosion on Izuku. However, that wouldn't have worked. Nothing would be happening, as Izuku would look over at Bakugo and would then punch him across the face. Bakugo would look down at his hands and would look at Izuku with a devilish glare. "What the hell did you do to me? Why can't I use my quirk?" As Izuku would then see that Bakugo could no longer use his quirk, as Izuku would then remember words that All Might had told him just around 11 months before this. "Remember, your quirk can mutate with All for One now in your body, so I suggest you try using your quirk about a week from now." Izuku's quirk had mutated, and now he could use his quirk like it was a just an eraser quirk. However, he had to touch them with his fingers. It was basically just like his laughter quirk now. If he touched somebody with one finger and he activated his quirk, then they would lose their quirk for 1 minute. Two fingers, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, and 5 minutes being the max. And if you're wondering why 5 minutes was the max, Izuku's quirk had evolved. His laughter quirk had basically split in half. Only he could use his left hand to do that, while his right hand had evolved to become an eraser quirk. So if he touched somebody with one of his fingers and activated his quirk on his right hand, they'd lost their quirk for a minute. So, say if he punched somebody and all 4 or 5 of his fingers hit them, and he activated his quirk along with One for All, that's a very strong punch, also erasing that person's quirk. Izuku's left hand had now a laughter quirk. However, Izuku didn't know that, as he thinks both of his hands can be used to just erase somebody's quirk. Izuku now liked the fact that he now had an eraser quirk too, and he thought it was now on his own and he could use it for both of his hands. He now thought finally the demon that it was his erase or not his eraser quirk, his laughter quirk had finally just being gone, being sealed away, locked up. As Izuku, remember, hated that quirk. It was just not serious at all and it wasn't focused. He liked how his father was and sort of hated how his mother decided to act and with her quirk. However, that doesn't mean he hates his mother, as he just hates the quirk that she has. I think I've said that before already. So Izuku would quickly restrain Bakugo after Bakugo was just completely staring at the palms of his hands, wondering why no firecrackers were coming out of his hands. 5 minutes later, as not Bakugo, as Izuku and Uraraka had already left the floor, looking for Todoroki at the top floor, Bakugo's just explosions would finally start again. However, he had been restrained and he couldn't use them at all. So Izuku would then make it up to the final floor, the fifth floor, as he would see Todoroki just in the room away, as Izuku would then rush over there, as he would see Todoroki stomp the ground with his foot, launching a massive iceberg right at Izuku, as Izuku would then tell Uraraka that he is going to just smash this ice and tons of pieces were going to fly out, and he wanted her to basically just use her quirk to make a rock out of this sort of ice. Now, Izuku had no clue what her quirk was. Izuku just thought it was some sort of gravity quirk, and he thought she could manipulate the gravity around the ice, smashing it together, making basically like an ice cannonball. However, she couldn't do this at all. So when she told him she couldn't do that, Izuku would then look towards the pillar, as he would see a pillar of just complete rock standing right by him. It was made out of concrete. Izuku would instantly grab this pillar and would break it off from the floor and the ceiling, handing it to Uraraka, as she would then make it light. As Izuku would then realize what her quirk was. It was an anti-gravity quirk where she could basically just touch an item and it would have anti-gravity. You all should know what her quirk is, because if you're watching this video, you're most likely have watched My Hero Academia. So Izuku would then hand her that, as he would tell her that he's going to smash this ice, and when he does, he wants her to hit the ice at Todoroki, causing a distraction, as he would then jump past the ice, as Todoroki would have likely covered his eyes so no ice would have hit them, so Izuku could then touch the bomb, therefore disarming it, as that's what All Might had told them how to disarm it. All you have to do is touch it. So Izuku would then smash the ice, as ice shards would come flying everywhere, as Uraraka would then hit or use the pillar in a swinging motion, much like a baseball would hit a bat. It's basically just the Comet home run thing from canon My Hero Academia, as this would work, causing Todoroki to try and cover his eyes, as Izuku would use this distraction to run up and touch the bomb. As soon as Todoroki would uncover his eyes, he would see Izuku had already touched the bomb, and Todoroki knew he had lost. All Might would then come over the speaker and would congratulate both Izuku and Uraraka, as they would be told to come back to just the main base area. So they would grab Bakugo and would go over there, as All Might would ask what maybe Bakugo or Todoroki could have done to make them win, since both Izuku and Uraraka won. Momo would then step up and tell them they could have just stayed together and worked together, but instead Bakugo decided to just run off and try to do everything on his own, and that's pretty much their downfall. So that's what Momo would say, as All Might would then thank Momo for what she had said, and would then tell them that they can now go take a seat, as he would then do another lottery to see which names would come up next, and which villains and heroes would be fighting against each other for the next test round. So the day would end with all the students finishing their test, as Izuku would be walking home, as Uraraka would then catch up to him, saying that he did quite well during the test. He would say, "Oh, yeah, you also did quite well. I wasn't quite sure what your quirk was at the start. I thought you had sort of just a gravity control quirk, but then I realized you had just an anti-gravity control quirk. But it's still quite cool. It's just not as cool though. Maybe if you work hard at your quirk, it could possibly mutate into something that's even stronger." Ochako would agree with this, as she would then walk off the other way back to her house, as Izuku would then sit in his house just waiting for the next school day to come. He had decided he didn't want to train that day, as he was very, very tired from the training beforehand, so he would just decide to sit down, just waiting for the next day to come. And when it did, Aizawa would tell them that in 2 weeks they will be going on a field trip. This field trip would be to a place called the USJ, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, but he will have to tell them the location later, as he doesn't want somebody to just leak the location of it on something like social media, which would cause a villain to come and attack them. So the 2 weeks would pass, as they would all be given an option to either put on their PE uniforms on or their hero costumes on. Most of the kids would put their hero costumes on unless they were destroyed and hadn't been replaced during the testing thing with All Might just 2 weeks prior. So they would all get their hero costumes on and would hop on a bus, as they would travel 30 minutes to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. as they would then get off to see the hero 13, as Uraraka would start to fangirl about how 13 was her favorite hero, as she wanted to become a rescue hero much like 13. So they would all walk up as 13 would start to explain what they would be doing. So 13 would open the doors as the students would just say, "Whoa, this place is massive! It looks much bigger on the inside than it does on the outside. This is crazy," as they would then look around at all of the different areas. But as soon as 13 was about to assign them different areas, they were startled by something in the center of just the plaza. As one of the kids would even yell out, "Whoa, they even have fake villains here!" As hundreds of villains would climb out of this purple mist type portal. As they would then see two more things come out and one even materialize from the portal. This, of course, being Shigaraki, the Nomu, and Kirogiri. Izuku would instantly look over at his father and would ask him what they should do, as Aizawa would tell them they need to stay back and get out through the doors as quick as possible, as he would jump down and start to fight the villains who were already starting to climb these steps towards the students. As Miss Joke would try to open a door for the students to just pile out of the building, however, her hand would get blocked by Kirogiri, opening up a portal and just saying that they cannot or he cannot let them pass, as he would open up a portal under them, causing most of the students to fall through, including Miss Joke, as Miss Joke, Izuku, and Suyu Asui would all land on a boat, this of course being the water area, as Izuku would then fall as he would look around to see the surroundings. He would see tons of just these fish type villains and aquatic villains with aquatic quirks, as Izuku would start to think, Asui, what's your quirk again? I haven't quite seen it yet. Oh, my quirk is a frog quirk. I basically have all the attributes of a frog, Suyu Asui would say, as Izuku would think even further. That makes me think of something. Well, if the villains knew what your quirks would be, wouldn't they have placed you in sort of a fire type zone, something where a frog wouldn't really be useful? However, they placed you in a water zone, so that leads me to believe that these villains don't know what our quirks are. As Asui's eyes would widen, "You're right," she would say, as Miss Joke would then come out from the back of the boat, as she would have heard what Izuku had said. "So, what do you suppose our plan should be, Izuku?" Izuku would think. "I'm not quite sure. I know I can use my strength quirk to punch the water. So, what I'm thinking is, Sue can launch me up into the air, or I can do that myself with my legs, and I can just punch the water. And somehow we can use that as a distraction to distract the villains, or creating sort of like a tide wave or some sort of wave that can distract the villains long enough to get us across the water, because they're not going to follow us up on land because they're aquatic quirks. They're not going to be very powerful." Miss Joke would wonder what they should do. Izuku's plan was good, but it wasn't great. It wasn't going to work 100% if they tried it. So they would continue to think, as Izuku would just see Aizawa getting his face pounded in by the Nomu, as he would grab both Miss Joke and Asui, as he would run up to the tip of the boat, jumping off with his full cowling as he would make it to land, as he would then look over at the Nomu. But before he could run and try to punch it, Miss Joke would put an arm between her and Izuku, as she would tell Izuku and Asui to stay back and she'll deal with this weird villain herself. Now we cut back to the top of the stairs as Miss 13, or the hero 13. Is it a girl? Is it a boy? I don't know. I think I saw a comment saying that saying Miss 13. I think I saw a comment that the hero 13 was a girl, but I'm not quite sure. I really don't know, and I don't want to search it up on the My Hero Academia wiki right now. So we just cut back to the top of the stairs as we see 13 pleading with Ida to hopefully just escape through the doors, as Kurogiri was looking at her, and that he can run and go tell the heroes that there was an attack at the USJ. As Ito would tell Miss I keep saying Miss 13. um, Ito would tell 13 that he won't do this, as he would then open up one of the doors as Kirogiri would look at Ida, who had already left. Kurogiri knew he couldn't leave as it would threaten them getting caught. So Ito would end up running down the streets to the UA school building, trying to just get there in time to save his friends by telling the heroes. As Ito would arrive, he would tell the heroes that there was just going to be attack or there was an attack at the USJ and they need to arrive there as fast as possible. As Nezu would then pick up a phone, calling All Might's number, telling him he needs to get down to the USJ, as Nezu would then call 911, telling them there's been a villain attack at the USJ or USJ high school building. So police cars would start their way over there, but it would be 20 minutes before they would even arrive, which is way too long, as All Might would arrive in 5 minutes, but that was already too late. Mr. Aizawa and Miss Joke had already been taken out by the Nomu, not killed, but in critical condition, much like 13, as Izuku had jumped in and tried to protect just all of the students behind him. Now, this wasn't very much. A very short group of students, I'm playing words here, a very short group of students had arrived to the middle to see both of their Class 1A teachers had their face stomped in by a massive bird that looked to be on a ton of steroids. So Izuku would just go into sort of like this boxing match against the Nomu. It would throw a punch which Izuku was able to dodge with his very high reflexes. Sure, Aizawa would have a lot more skill and training than Izuku, but Izuku had also put in a lot of time that Aizawa hadn't, as Izuku had learned how to dodge insanely quickly, as it would go very well with his strength quirk. Now, you may have a very good quirk that increases your strength, but that's nothing if you can't dodge. So you may have a very good strength quirk, but if someone's going to throw a punch at you, it's still going to hurt. So it's great if you can dodge simple things like that. So Izuku was easily able to dodge a punch like this, as the Nomu wasn't even using 100% of its power. It was nowhere close to its full extent, as the Nomu had not really known the powers of all of these kids. It was sort of just toying with them, if you think about it, as Izuku would continue to dodge as the Nomu would continue to ramp up its punch speed, as Izuku would continue dodging as he would go for a punch with the Nomu's chest as it was wide open, unblocked. And as soon as Izuku's punch would land, nothing would happen. The Nomu would just look down at Izuku, as it would then punch Izuku right in the stomach, sending him flying up, as he would drop down into the water below him, as Izuku would then start to go deeper and deeper into the water as the aquatic quirked villains would just start circling him, just arguing who would attack him first. However, before they could even attack him, Asui would jump into the water, pulling Izuku out of it before any of the villains that were like sharks or any villain that was in the water could even attack him, as Izuku would have been passed out from the punch completely. No matter how strong Izuku could have gotten, that punch was insane. Remember, this punch is from a Nomu that could keep up with All Might. Sure, it's not All Might in his prime, but this is Izuku we're talking about. He's a 15-year-old kid that has pretty much no experience beating villains. He has experience fighting his dad in his backyard, but that's nothing compared to real villains that don't go easy on you because you're a kid. So Izuku would be passed out as the kids were just simply sitting there with no teachers left as they were forced to fend for themselves. However, as soon as Izuku was pulled out of the water, a door would be burst open, and this, of course, would be All Might. as he wouldn't be smiling, as he would instantly jump into action, swooping up all of the kids and putting them by the doorway, telling them to take Aizawa, Miss Joke, and 13, and Izuku all out of the USJ, and would have to just stand outside waiting for him to be finished. And this, of course, would be all the kids in the plaza, which was only around this was only around 5 or 6 kids, which would be Kaminari, Momo, and Jiro, and just um, it would be also Izuku and Suyu Asui. Mineta wasn't there; he had been placed in a different group. And Izuku, of course, would have been passed out, as all of them would just walk out of the door, or they would be running out of the door, along with the group that was also up there, who would ran out when All Might had arrived. So All Might would start to fight the Nomu, as the kids that were still in there, like Todoroki and Bakugo, would watch as they had already defeated all the villains around them, as they would watch All Might fight this Nomu and struggle, as it surely seemed like the Nomu was going to beat All Might, as All Might would start to cough out just bursts of smoke, as it would start to just come out everywhere, just like it was when he would turn into the Small Might form, as All Might knew it was about to happen, and he was about to show his true form to even the villains, which he knew this couldn't happen. As Izuku would then wake up, as he would activate his quirk. This was but another ability from Izuku's quirk. He can touch something and it can last. His touch can last for up to 30 minutes, 30 seconds. And Izuku had just gotten punched and pulled out of the water. That's just around 15 seconds. So Izuku would activate his quirk, and he had punched the Nomu with all 5 of his fingers, as the Nomu would lose its all of its quirks, as the Nomu would then instantly just fall to its knees. Its quirks were keeping it alive, mostly its regeneration quirk, as Izuku's hand would be clenched up in a fist, as it was basically taking a ton of power to keep its quirk just erased from its body, as Izuku can erase a quirk from some small type of person that barely has any control. Say, someone like Bakugo who doesn't have just crazy implanted strength quirks. Izuku couldn't erase All Might's quirk. He might be able to do it for a couple seconds, but as soon as All Might struggles, or just a little bit tries to release its quirk, which is insanely powerful, Izuku's just not going to be able to contain how much power it is, and his eraser seal that basically seals away their quirk in their body would just instantly break, which it deteriorates over time, becoming weaker as the 5 minutes would pass. So Izuku would end up barely being able to hold the Nomu's his quirk just sealed away, as Izuku would yell for All Might to finish off the Nomu before his quirk just gives out and he fully passes out. As All Might would then go 100% and smash the Nomu into the ground, as Shigaraki would retreat without the Nomu. It was too risky for them to retreat and grab the Nomu, risking them to be caught and being interrogated by someone who has a truth-seeking quirk. So Izuku would then release his seal on the Nomu, who had already been killed by All Might. It was really just a brainless thing that couldn't think at all, so it didn't really matter. At least that's what All Might thought. Police cars and ambulances would arrive, taking away the heroes that were unconscious, taking them to the hospital to get care, or just trauma care, or anything that could help them, especially 13, Aizawa, and Miss Joke, which two are the only people being taken to the hospital. Luckily, none of the students had gotten hurt. Sure, Izuku had been punched into the water, but it sort of helped with the water relaxing his muscles down, so that it wouldn't hurt as much as it would have if he didn't land in water or he landed in a concrete just pile of bricks. So Izuku would then just be standing there as they would go back to UA and be told they must not tell anybody about this. If the press realizes what had happened, UA would basically be just flagged and would just be said to be this destructive school, and many of their parents would probably pull them out of the hero program. So, if they wanted to risk their hero careers, they could tell their parents. However, Nezu would just advises them not to, as Nezu would then tell them that they will have 3 weeks off, and as soon as the first day they come back, they will have the UA Sports Festival, and that they must prepare for it. As if they do not prepare for it, they basically will get easily defeated in the first round. So Izuku would walk back to his house, just completely contemplating on what had happened during that day. He had 3 weeks off of school to start training for the sports festival, and so that's what he was going to do. He was going to train, and that's pretty much all he did for the 3 weeks, as it would pass by very, very quickly, with Izuku just training the entire time. Pretty much all he did was train. He wanted to win. He wanted everyone to know he was the person that was going to become the number one hero, and he wasn't going to let anybody stop him from doing that. Izuku would walk into school after the 3 weeks had passed, as he would then sit down. Aizawa would give them their sports festival costumes, which was just like what they were given in the anime, as they would be told to go put them on and get on the bus. He would not return with the bus for anybody who was late. So they would all rush down there, get changed, and would hop on the bus, as they would then travel to the sports festival Coliseum, as they would make it there through a hidden entrance just so no civilians were able to see them entering and possibly attack them if they were a villain. So Izuku and the rest of his classmates would all just walk into these rooms that were considered waiting rooms, as they would look around, as they would then hear something come over the intercom. Class 1A, please wait for us to say your name to come out onto the field. As soon as we do, we will then just tell you to come out onto the field, and then the first year representative in your class will come up onto the podium and give a speech. Izuku and the rest of the class would just be sitting there bored out of their minds. 20 minutes had passed and nothing was really going on. As Miss Joke, of course, being in a happy mood, would try to brighten them up, telling them, "Come on, guys, today's gonna be the sports festival. We're already here. This is your chance to get into a great hero internship. So I suggest you guys try your hardest. Because if you're all sad like this, it's not going to be easy for you all to win." Some people would cheer up by this, while some people would not really care, just like Todoroki wouldn't really care, as Izuku would just thank his mom for the words of encouragement, as they would finally hear over the intercom someone telling them to come out onto the field, as they would then hear President Mike yell, "And now welcoming Class 1A!" as the doors would open, revealing the bright shining lights as they would walk out onto the field, as the crowd would roar in excitement. Here was Class 1A, the next generation of heroes. As Izuku would look around, just completely baffled about how many people are here. He's never been in a stage that was so big. He's never been just around so many people that were supposedly just cheering for him and his class and the rest of the people there, as they would all line up around the podium, as they would then ask for the Class 1A or just the first year representative to come up onto the board and give a speech. So Izuku would walk up, wishing everyone well and hope that they all have a chance at winning just the tournament and hope they win the sports festival. As Midnight would then take the mic from Izuku, explaining what the first event would be, a race, and for them to all come into this hallway sort of thing, as they would just have to wait for President Mike to yell go, and to just race around the Coliseum, trying to just get to the finish line before anyone else. Izuku would start to power up his full cowling, as the doors would open, as President Mike would then yell go. Izuku instantly would burst off using his Quirk, rushing into just this racetrack, as he would instantly see ahead of him massive zero pointers awaiting him and the rest of the people behind him. as Izuku knew it would be smart to just avoid them, as soon as he got in close to them, he would jump and bounce himself off of the wall of the sports festival, basically using something like what Gran Torino would do, as he would bounce off this wall and over the zero pointer, as he would then land and would continue running off into the next obstacle, which would be the cavern caves obstacle, as Izuku would see Bakugo and Todoroki gaining on him, as he would power up full cowling to his full blast that he could do, which would be 25%, which is exactly one fourth of One for All now unlocked. As Izuku would continue just running through just these obstacles, hopping just these floating island to floating island, as he would then make it to the final obstacle, a minefield. This is where Bakugo and Todoroki would pass him, Bakugo just using his explosions to fly over the minefield, and Todoroki using his ice to glide over it. Izuku would try to jump fully over it, but he would find himself falling a bit short, as he would then have one of his feet land exactly on a mine, as he would then jump off of it, using the explosion to propel himself forward, flying at an increased velocity, passing both Bakugo and Todoroki, and then landing on his feet and running passing the finish line. It was severely just crazy, especially to the fans in the Coliseum who went crazy as they saw it, and it was just amazing. It looked like Izuku had just practiced this, as you could see him jump and land. As he would jump, an explosion would just send him flying forward, and for him to just land on his feet was insane. As remember, Izuku had some insane reflexes. He trained for years to make it into UA, and if you think he didn't train on his reflexes and acrobatics, then you're just insane. Of course he did this. He was training for pretty much around 7 to 8 years. The second event would be announced to be the cavalry battle, as they would be given 20 minutes of rest before that would begin. When the 20 minutes would be up, they would have an additional 5 minutes to make a team, and if they were to go teamless, they would have to fight that way as well. As while they were making teams, Midnight would explain the rules about the headband system, and if you were in first place, you would have the 10 million point headband. However, this didn't bother Izuku, as he would be able to find a team of Uraraka, Mei Hatsume, and Tokoyami. When Mei Hatsume would ask if she could use her gadgets for the cavalry battle, Izuku knew that a malfunction was going to happen. It was just his luck when something like this was to happen, so Izuku would kindly tell her that he doesn't want something bad to happen, but he can always do that in the next event, as they will surely make it to the next event if they follow his leadership or what he wanted them to do, as he would then give them all instructions for them to just stay defensive. They don't want to stay offensive, as that's just going to get a bigger target on their back that's already there with the 10 million point headband, which is a guaranteed success or victory. So Izuku would tell them, we just need to sort of blend in, as Mei Hatsume would tell them that she actually has a device for that. All they have to do is put on these watches, and when she clicks a button, it all makes them just go disappear by basically forming some sort of barrier around them. And if they use that, they could possibly just stand on the edge of the map and not get caught a single time. So Izuku would tell them, alright, then let's do this. They would all put on the watches, as they would then go invisible, as they would then be told the event will now begin. As people would start to look around for the 10 million point headband group, they couldn't find them. They had just strangely disappeared. People in the crowd saw what happened, while most of them did not. Some did, some just didn't. They really weren't paying attention. They didn't really care about the rules, they just cared about the action. So 30 minutes would pass with nobody really knowing where the 10 million point headband was, in just confusion. As the timer would then sound, signaling that the event was up, as Midnight would then tell them all to please head back to the main area and that they will now explain who had passed, what teams had passed, and what the next event will be. As they would then take off the watches, becoming invisible or becoming visible, as they would then stand there as everyone just seeing them just transform out of the light into just some being, and it was just crazy. They had basically just disappeared and then reappeared out of nowhere. So Midnight would then explain that they will have a 1v1 tournament for the top 4 teams. And like in canon My Hero Academia, Izuku would be faced with fighting Shinso, which is going to be the first round and the first fight of the sports festival. So everyone would then be told where they can find their place in the stands, and that's where they will going to be seated watching the 1v1 tournament if they either make it or did not. So Izuku would walk up on to this sort of mini arena inside the Colosseum, as Shinso would then walk up onto the arena as well. However, before Izuku could fully take a step onto it, he would be told by one of his classmates, Ojiro, that kid has some sort of mind control quirk and not to answer any questions from him. As Izuku would then step up onto the arena, as the match would then begin. Shinso would then start speaking, trying to insult Izuku's classmates, trying to make Izuku angry so he would talk. "Oh, did that monkey tell you something?" Shinso would say, but Izuku wouldn't care, just simply walking over to Shinso as Shinso would start to freak out. He hadn't really planned for anything past this, as Izuku would then reach Shinso, as Izuku would trip Shinso and push him out of the arena, as he would fall out of bounds, with Izuku just putting out a hand for Shinso to take so Izuku could pull him back up off of the ground. As Shinso would just not even care about this, as Midnight would yell, "And Izuku Aizawa is the winner!" with Izuku just walking back with his classmates, congratulating him. The next match would be Izuku versus Ida, which Izuku would easily win, as Ida had used his speed to just circle around Izuku. However, Izuku, as soon as he saw Ida go for an attack or step out of this circle pattern, Izuku would instantly go right at Ida and punch him out of bounds, which would only take one punch, as Ida was going at a very fast speed, and with Izuku's punch, it had made all that speed completely change direction, as he would land on the soft grass outside of the concrete arena. So Izuku would then be placed in the semi-finals against Todoroki. Bakugo had been already beaten the person in the semi-finals, who was Kirishima, and he had went on to the finals. So Izuku would then stand on the arena, just standing there waiting for Todoroki to arrive. As Todoroki would then arrive, telling Izuku he's not going to go easy on him, and that he's going to beat him with just his ice quirk. As Izuku would smile, knowing exactly what happened the last time Todoroki tried to just use his ice quirk on Izuku, but Uraraka was there with him, so he wasn't quite sure what he should do. As instantly as the match would start, Todoroki would send a massive iceberg right at Izuku, as Izuku would barely be able to dodge it, being caught completely off guard, as Izuku would then look over at Todoroki, who would start to run at him, sending tons of ice at Izuku, who would be able to flick the ice just like he did in the canon My Hero Academia fight against Todoroki, which would shatter the ice into thousands of different pieces, as Izuku would continually just go around the arena running, knowing that Todoroki couldn't keep up with Izuku just sprinting around the arena. However, he knew that his stamina wasn't going to last very long, and that Todoroki was going to win the long game of this fight. So Izuku knew he had to end it quite early. He also knew why Todoroki was running at him, trying to get closer. The closer Todoroki was to Izuku, the harder it would be to dodge one of his icebergs. Quirks, as Izuku would continually just dodge this until he saw his chance. Todoroki would slip on some ice that he had left behind, that Izuku had flicked the top of the iceberg, but there was still a slick sheet of ice left. As Todoroki would slip on it, with Izuku taking his chance, instantly appearing in front of Todoroki with Izuku's insane speed, and punching him down, hitting Todoroki's stomach, as Todoroki would then hit the ground, just completely dazed by Izuku's punch. It had knocked the breath out of him, as Izuku would then see Todoroki try to get up, with him punching Todoroki across the face, sending him out of the arena, as Izuku would then be said to be going on to the finals against Bakugo Katsuki. A 10-minute waiting period would begin for them to set up the final stage, and with the podium behind the stage, as Izuku would then walk onto the stage, seeing Bakugo already there, as Bakugo would then begin to speak to Izuku. The crowd could not hear this, nor could the teachers, as the crowd was chanting and roaring so loud due to it being the finals. The only person that could hear Bakugo speak was Izuku himself. As Bakugo would then start to cough. Do you know how I got this cough, Izuku? And this scar on my face? It should be obvious how I got these. You would know better than anyone. Not your father or your mother, since you were there. What do you mean, Bakugo? What are you saying? Isn't it obvious, Izuku? I was the one who did it. I killed your sister. It's been in front of your face this whole time. I just can't believe you've been stupid enough not to notice. No, Izuku would say. This can't be true. Why would you do such an evil thing? You let your sister stand up for yourself, Izuku. A little quirkless person standing up themselves against the almighty Bakugo. I had to show that pebble what their place was in this world. In the ground. And that's where she belongs, Izuku. I was there when you buried her, too. I saw everything. You burying her in the cemetery just made me smile seeing pain. Izuku would look at Bakugo and would then feel an instant just urge to kill Bakugo right there, as Izuku would then go into some senseless rage, launching himself towards Bakugo before the match had even started, as Bakugo would then smile, as Izuku would punch Bakugo right across the face, sending him barreling into the ground, as Izuku would then continue to just beat on Bakugo, as heroes would then jump down, this being Midnight, and would then release her quirk, knocking out Izuku, as the entire crowd would then grow silent. What had they just witnessed? Izuku had just randomly jumped into a rage and started attacking this poor boy. At least that's what the crowd had thought. As Izuku would then be transported to just an interrogation room where Nezu would sit down, just wondering what had caused Izuku to do this. As the crowd would then be told Izuku had been disqualified from the tournament, as Bakugo would be said to be given the first place award, Todoroki would come in second, and Tokiyami would come in third, as Izuku would then wake up from Midnight's gas, as he would then see Nezu sitting across from him at a table, as Izuku would see both of his hands handcuffed to the table so that he couldn't run away. What are you, why did you do that, Izuku? Nezu would say. You just assaulted Bakugo for no reason. The match had not even started yet. Why'd you do that? It's all clear now, Izuku would say. Bakugo did that because he knew I'd react that way. He knew I'd get in trouble. He planned this out from the beginning. Well, I don't know what you're saying, Nezu would then speak to Izuku, but I'm going to be forced to expel you from UA High School. It's just not right to attack someone without even having any word to do that. Sure, you were in a 1v1 tournament and in the finals, but the match had not even began yet. So I'm just gonna have to disqualify you from the tournament and expel you from UA High School. Bakugo knew this the entire time. He knew something like this would end up happening. It was all part of his plan. He planned everything out from the beginning. How could I be so blind to this? Izuku would continue saying. Nezu would then speak to Izuku again. I hope your parents have a good enough lawyer, as that can be seen as assault in people's eyes, and maybe even an attempted murder. It really just depends on what the Bakugo family wants to do. So I advise you to keep your mouth shut, not to say anything stupid like you're babbling on about right now. Izuku would look down to the handcuffs placed on his hands, as he would see they were not Quirk erasing handcuffs, as he would activate his Quirk, breaking the handcuffs, and would then jump through and shattering a window back behind Nezu, as Nezu would look out the window to see Izuku start to run. As Nezu would then sound an alarm, hoping that a hero could catch him, but with his insane speed, they could not, as Izuku would then run into the woods in a direction as it would take him a couple hours, but he had reached it. Ashes and just ruins of an old building from years ago. This was the childhood home him, his sister, and his parents had lived in before the fire. It was all coming clear to him now. The scar on his face was caused by Izumi trying to protect herself, and the cough Bakugo had been hiding. He had gotten it from inhaling all the flames and carbon dioxide. Izuku was now realizing this. Bakugo had planned everything from the start, all because Izumi was just protecting herself for being quirkless and Bakugo trying to bully her. And Izuku could do nothing about it now. He was now suspected of being a murderer, as Izuku would then rush back to his not his childhood home, but the home he now lives in, as he would rush in and grab a black hoodie that he had and black pants, putting those on and then putting the hood over his head, as he would start to walk around the city, as it was now nighttime, as he would then look to a store display, seeing a TV with the news on it. Top hero prospect Izuku Aizawa now turning to become a villain? We have more on this now. Now you can see in the UA Sports Festival, the top hero prospect of the first year class of UA High School could possibly have became a villain, as you can see here in this clip. During the UA Sports Festival, it looks to appear like an attempted murder against another student in his class named Bakugo Katsuki. And now, a word from his parents. Oh, we were just so scared. We didn't know if Bakugo was going to make it out alive. You could tell in his voice, or you could tell in his eyes and his face, it looked like he was just trying to kill young Bakugo here. And it sure looks like he's been scarred. We surely want the police to catch this attempted murderer and this criminal. This villain shall not be left roaming the streets. As Izuku's heart would just drop, he was now seen like by a villain by everyone. As Izuku would then hear somebody else on the news sympathizing for him. Oh, I don't think that at all. You couldn't even hear him. I was there. You could see Bakugo's mouth moving, but you couldn't hear anything he was saying. Maybe Bakugo possibly said something that made Izuku angry. It's just some people have different personalities than others. I really don't think we should be saying he's an attempted murderer. He really has done pretty much nothing wrong. I think it's insane that people are saying this is assault and attempted murder. It's just crazy. I mean, this kid's only 15, one of the newscasters would say, as Izuku would keep walking along, as he would then end up finding a warehouse, as he would end up opening the door and sitting down. He could see that it was furnished, and that was quite strange. It looked abandoned with broken windows and just shattered pieces of glass everywhere. As Izuku would then hear the door open as well, as he would look over to see another person just staring at him. Izuku had taken his hood off of his head, as this person would now see who Izuku was. And this person would be Ochako Uraraka. Her parents had just lost their home as their just construction company had not really been doing well, and they were forced to go off site and start doing other jobs that couldn't make a house. So basically, Uraraka was forced to just squat in this warehouse and live there for the time being, as Uraraka would then see Izuku sitting down on the couch, as she would rush over to him saying what had happened and how did he get here? Did he really try to kill Bakugo? Izuku would just shake his head no. Bakugo had said he killed my sister. It's a long story that I'll tell you later, but I'm going to need your help, which could possibly cause you to risk just dropping out of UA and not becoming a hero altogether. Uraraka would be confused. What do you mean? I need you to search for somebody who can see into the past and broadcast it. It's a very rare quirk that I heard about that someone had. I think I heard about it. Someone had it or was born with it when I was 10. It basically allows them to touch a TV and a person, and they can go to someone's past memories and display it on the TV. I can make sure Bakugo basically shows what he did to my sister and my house, or my old house, that is, and so that I can finally become innocent while he will be thrown in jail for what he did. Uraraka would understand what Izuku was saying as she would then begin the hunt for somebody who had this rare quirk, as Izuku would then continue just running around the streets of Daegu, I believe, or wherever the UA High School was located at. This was a couple of days after Izuku had found the warehouse, as he would just roam the streets, as he would then climb up a ladder onto the rooftop of a building, as he would then see All Might jump out of nowhere, as it would then begin a chase, as All Might would be telling Izuku just to come back to UA so he can explain everything, as he doesn't want the successor of One for All to fall into a path of villainy, as Izuku would say he doesn't understand what Bakugo had said and done to Izuku. However, All Might was just basically leading Izuku somewhere just a mile ahead of where All Might had jumped out, as Izuku, completely focused on All Might, would then jump down onto the road hoping to cause a distraction and to run off. However, he had jumped right into an intersection, as cars would then block this intersection as hundreds, or not hundreds, but a ton of police officers all would point guns right at Izuku's head, as All Might would then land right down, as police would completely encircle the two of them, as All Might would tell Izuku just to come back to UA High School so that Izuku can just tell his side of the story. However, Izuku would just shake his head. You don't understand, All Might. You don't understand at all. You see, you don't know what Bakugo said to me there during the sports festival. You don't know what he did a couple of years ago to me and my sister. All Might wouldn't care about this and would take Izuku's distraction and would grab Izuku, putting him in handcuffs, as Izuku will tell them that he is going to ruin the life of their number one hero. Izuku knew that Bakugo was going to become the number one hero, as Izuku would tell All Might he didn't mean him, which All Might wanted to know. What do you mean you don't mean me? You just said you were going to ruin my life. Not yours, Bakugo. I can already tell what's going to happen. When I get out of prison, in I believe 10 years from now, Bakugo's gonna be the number one hero. And hopefully by now, my friend will have found somebody with the quirk I was looking for. And hopefully they'll agree to just show everyone of the world what Bakugo had done to my sister and me, as Izuku would then be sentenced to 10 years in prison, just like he thought. A lot less for just what people thought was an assault and attempted murder, but of course he was 15 and was not really not really an adult yet. So Izuku would be sitting in jail for basically a very stupid crime as the 10 years would then pass. As Izuku would get out of jail with just a crowd of people surrounding it. These were filled with just the press and sympathizers to Izuku. Izuku would see Uraraka standing very close to the front of the crowd, as he would then see her push her way to the front with a child that looked to be just around 15. As Izuku would then tell them he will give them just some money if they were to show something of the number one hero. So this kid, of course, would agree, as Izuku would then start to speak. Your number one hero is not who it seems to be. What do you mean? Someone would ask. Well, all we need to do is have the number one hero come here. And I suspect they're in the crowd now, because they've always liked to see me in pain and ruin my life. So, I suggest you step up here unless you want your just supposed all your credibility to just waste away in a second. So someone would then step up to the crowd, this of course being Bakugo Katsuki, who pretty much not very many people realized since he wasn't in costume. As this person would then, or a lot of people would then see the resemblance between the number one hero, as they would realize the number one hero was then standing on a stage. Now, if you will, as Izuku would gesture towards the 15-year-old kid with the cork, as this person would grab Bakugo's shoulder and would then grab the TV, as Izuku would tell the kid an exact date, as this kid would then go to a date and a time, as they would then see Bakugo with a can of gasoline as he would be walking in the forest. People would be very confused by this, as they would then hear him talk. This will show what that Corkless Izumi done. This will show Izuku too, as they can see this kid burst into this house and start to pour gasoline all over it, as they also see a sleeping girl on the couch in the living room, as you could then see Bakugo grab a rag and then put some sort of chemical on it, just pulling it over the girl's mouth as she would then wake up, but then pass out, as Bakugo would then use his quirk, igniting the house on fire as Bakugo would just look completely shocked at the TV screen, as it would then cut to the sports festival, another exact date Izuku had given him, as he would then hear what Bakugo had told Izuku, and would pretty much justify Izuku's actions. Pretty much anyone in Izuku's position would have acted that way towards Bakugo, as Bakugo would feel and see his career start to go down in shambles, as Bakugo would then jump away, as he would jump from rooftop to rooftop, as people would then start to just wonder, is this real? And could this possibly be true? Is this kid just using his quirk to manipulate Bakugo's past? But why would Bakugo react like that? Now, people would start to wonder. It wasn't going to immediately cause a police chase, but it was going to cause speculation, and that's what Izuku wanted. As Izuku would then see another news broadcast. The villain boy known as Izuku Aizawa has just been released from prison after 10 years, also showing some shocking news, as he came to the crowd with some other boy, possibly around 15 years old, and a girl, as the number one hero himself showed up, as this kid with the cork put his hand on Bakugo's shoulder and onto this TV screen, as it then played him killing a young girl inside of a house, igniting it on fire using his explosion cork. Do you think this could possibly be an alteration of his memory? As it would then cut to another person speaking. Oh, no, definitely not, as the detail was way too close to just being manipulated into something that was not real. And two, if you look, the way Bakugo reacted is just completely insane. Why would you react that way if it's not true? If it was not true, wouldn't you get defensive of this? He instantly reacted by running away as if because he was shameful about himself, or he just didn't want to get backlash for what he did by the crowd of sympathizers and press for Izuku Aizawa. So, what do you think? Now, after this, Izuku would know an investigation would happen, as they would then start to ask the boy if he would like to take some quirk tests to reveal something about his quirk, and just random things about his quirk, which of course he would agree with. He himself was an Izuku sympathizer, as he was 5 years old, and he had learned about what Izuku had supposedly done, and it really just didn't seem all that much to even a 5-year old. So this person would then be told that they will take tests to see what his quirk was, and all they would do is take a tiny sample of blood, as they would then see that his quirk can see into the past of somebody by touching their shoulder, and then a TV or a monitor or just some other type of screen, as it completely tells the truth and the past of somebody, which means what Bakugo did actually happened. Now, did he rescue the girl or did the girl get rescued? Now that's the thing, as no one really knew about Izumi or Izuku at the time of the murder. So this is where Mr. Aizawa and Miss Joke would then step forward and would say that Izumi there, or the daughter on the couch, was their daughter, and that's why Izuku reacted that way, because Bakugo had killed his sister when they were 13 years old. So it pretty much justifies why Izuku had acted that way, and since Bakugo was a murderer. So Izuku would basically just be freed of all the charges he had, as a wide scale investigation would then occur. They had all the evidence they now just had to capture Bakugo. As Izuku would then begin his search for Bakugo. However, he had to he got a apology from Nezu, as Nezu would tell him he has just a private just quirk analysis or just some type of quirk testing so that he can get his hero license. They knew Izuku was already smart enough to get his hero license and strong enough. They just had to test him, which of course he passed very, very easily. So Izuku would then get his hero license and would then begin his just hero scale testing, or not testing, he would then begin his hero investigation to try and find Bakugo, as a wide-scale just manhunt would occur looking for Bakugo Katsuki, as they would finally find him running in a forest, which is kind of ironic, saying as it was the same forest they had found or they had seen him around the house. It was the exact same forest where the house was, and he was running as he was hiding in that house. It's quite sad no one thought about looking there at the same house where Izumi had been killed, as Bakugo would be captured and would then be told that he's going to go into just a trial to see how many years he could get, as they would then see this jury and all this trial as Izuku, Miss Joke, and Mr. Aizawa would testify against Bakugo, saying how Bakugo caused a ton of emotional stress and even caused Izuku to be thrown in jail for 10 years, taking 10 years out of Izuku's life just because he just decided to kill Izuku's sister Izumi. As with all this evidence and the jury finding Bakugo guilty, I don't really know a lot about juries. Like, I've watched a couple of Judge Judy's before, so that's pretty much the extent I know, and that's lawsuits, not criminal cases. So Bakugo would then be sentenced to life in prison, as he would say they can't do this, as he would jump at the judge trying to use his quirk, but the quirk canceling handcuffs around Bakugo's hands just wouldn't allow that, as he would fall flat on his face. As Izuku would then begin his journey to become the number one hero, slowly climbing up the ranks and becoming the number one hero, surpassing Shoto Todoroki. And that's where this what if is going to be finished. It's probably the longest what if I've ever recorded. because I recorded part one, right? And this is before I decided to make it a movie. So I recorded part one, and then I make it a movie, and I've recorded, I believe, just around 2 or 1.5 hours of audio today. But besides that, I thank you all for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed this what if, as it was quite fun to record. And yeah, I thank you all for watching. Remember, this is Anime Outlet. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.